Have you ever internally felt as if your children saw you as a failure? That's what I want to talk about today and what goes into that feeling and how, as parents in general, but especially fathers, how that can shape us negatively or positively. And this week's topic is pretty near and dear to my own life because I often feel like my son, who is 14 and who has seen me go through a lot of ups and downs, I found myself wondering, like, yo, is he judging me internally? Right? Because my life probably looks a lot different than what he's used to as far as his friends, right? And the first thing I want to say about, and I'll go into the reasonings why I feel this way and the reasons why, as a parent, you may also internally think about this. And I think before I get into that, I just want to say if you feel this way, you're not alone. And you're also not weird for feeling like, man, is my child ashamed of me, or because of my perceived lack of success, my perceived lack of accomplishment, or whatever my circumstances are right now. Does my circumstances have my child judging me, or maybe is disappointed in me? And so you're not alone if you felt this way. And it's all about obviously giving yourself a lot of compassion while trying to navigate whatever state that you feel like you're in, right? Whatever you're thinking is not successful, navigate that and look at all the ways that you are, quote unquote, successful, and see it from their eyes. And for me personally, I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm 38 years old, right? And two things that weigh heavy on me is that one, I just recently, it's not even been recent actually, right? It's been over 2 years now that I've moved back to my parents' home in order to help save money to help grow my mindful fatherhood business. And, being 38 and living at your parents' home, it doesn't matter well, okay, it does matter the reason why I'm here. And that's where it comes, like, that's where being compassionate to myself comes into play. Because if I'm compassionate to myself, I can look at it and say, well, I did something smart. But as opposed to all his friends and their dads who own homes, it I feel less than. And so when he goes to his friends' houses and they hang out, I'm wondering, like, is he in there like, man, like my dad doesn't even have his own home, his own apartment. My dad just has his own room. And that can weigh a lot on a man. That's the one thing I internalize a lot. Is just my circumstance. Is my Even though I know my circumstance is temporary, like, is my circumstance, does my son feel less than being my son? Is he judging me because of my current circumstance? And my son is a loving kid, and but at 14 years old, these are things that can kind of like get infested in your mind. You fall victim to comparison. And he is my number one supporter, but I still have this feeling of like, oh man, I'm wondering, am I disappointing him? And it's all coming from comparison because I'm comparing myself to other men, right? And that's a thing that I've been self-aware and I've realized. And so com- circumstance is one. The other reason why I tend to ask myself this question a lot is family dynamic. So my son has a little sister who is 4 years old, and they have different moms. And so I often feel like I've disappointed my son because I have yet to truly give him that family dynamic that, once again, I'm sure he sees with the majority of his friends. I think he has one good friend who is in like a co-parenting thing, but nearly almost all of his friends at school, on the basketball team, nearly every single one of them have that like traditional family unit, as opposed to him where he's like going back and forth from house to house since he was like a year old. And one can say he's used to it, right? I'm sure he is, but I just wonder, like, man, I'm sure he would love, like, even with his sister's mom, right? Like, that didn't work out. And so I'm sure he would have loved to have some sort of family home unit, when it comes to his dad, right? Seeing his dad in a loving relationship, having that mom and dad type of vibe that he can kind of rely on a day-to-day basis. Like, he doesn't get that. And obviously everything that has occurred between his mom and I isn't all my fault, right? There's two people in it. And so obviously I take great responsibility for my for my emotional capability at that time. I was very young, and I'm sure she does as well. But at the end of the day, even though two people were in it, because I'm so hard on myself, I'm navigating it like, oh, it's my fault. Or like, he's disappointed in me, but not his mom for not giving him that dynamic. And so, these are things that I've been thinking about a lot is, am I disappointing my son? And I think if you're feeling this way in your life as a father, as a parent, I think what is hard for us to do is to look at all the things that they would be proud of and magnify those instead of what we're perceiving as failure. And anytime I say like the word negative or failure, I tend to always like air quote them, and I tend to use the word perceived, because in real time it's very hard to realize that things that you're going through is actually happening for you. It can come off as like toxic positivity, right? But like, I truly feel that way. And I know that because of everything I've been through, right? My $80,000 that I've spent on a custody battle just to have my son half the month, that has left me in like a lot of financial and emotional distress. But without that, I wouldn't be the dad I am today. Without that, I wouldn't have this YouTube channel. Without that, I wouldn't have a journal that I created for fathers. So that happened for me. And it's hard for us to think like this in real time. And so I'm 38 and I live at home, but that for some reason overshadows the fact that I have I'm my only one of my only friends with an undergraduate degree. I'm one of my only friends with a master's in business degree from a top 10 business school in the nation. I'm one of my only friends who is an entrepreneur. And it's just like, where I come from like the gutter, right? And when I say I'm one of my only friends, I'm not saying this to like put down any of my friends. I'm just saying it as the reality is, I've achieved things that a lot of people I know have the desire to achieve. And that doesn't make me better than anyone. But if I just take a scope back, one of my friends who passed away a few years ago due to gun violence, he said something to me that really stuck with me. He's like, bro, the things you've accomplished, look around. None of us have done it. And if it was easy, we would have all done it, right? If it was easy, we would have all done it. And those were like the last words he said to me before he passed. And it's hard for us when we are so much trapped in the comparison game. It's hard for us to magnify the great things that we've achieved. And, when I got my MBA a few years ago, non-traditional student, that's also an achievement, right? To be 34 years old, 35 years old, co-parenting, working a full-time job, and to pursue your master's in business while you have a teenager, while you have an infant. And that's an achievement. That in itself is an achievement that I know he looks at and he's very proud of. But I don't magnify that, right? I magnify the perceived failures. And back to what I was saying earlier, the reason why I always put the air quotes and why I say negatives are things that I'm perceiving as negative is because I know that the negatives and the quote unquote failures, I know that they are for me. I know that a lesson will be learned from these things. So are they truly negative, right? Are they truly a failure? If it's going to catapult me and help me not only help myself, but help anyone in the world, is it truly negative? And so, I've been thinking about that a lot, man. Like my son is about to be in high school this fall. And it's like, as a ninth grader, he has to come here and sleep on an airbed in the guest room downstairs. Prior to that, he was like sleeping in my bed with me, right? As a seventh grader. And it was just like, man, like I know this dude doesn't care, but my knowing that he doesn't care is not outweighing my ego. It's not outweighing my feeling of being less than. And it's really because I'm comparing myself to others. And like it's easy to tell someone else that may be going through something like, yo, run your own race. Like everything will happen in due time. Everything happens for a reason. And it's so easy to say that to someone and mean it. But it's hard for us to throw that back onto ourselves. And so, like as I sit here and I record this and, I'm getting ready in a couple hours to start my 9 to 5. I make over six figures. Like, but none of that matters because I don't take the time to internalize that I'm trying. I just take the time to look at what I don't have and where I am currently. And I think that's a shame. I really do. And if you're in this situation where you're going through anything and you think to yourself like, oh my gosh, I wonder if my kid sees me as a failure, I would say work on what I'm working on right now. And that's taking the time to appreciate and acknowledge what you've achieved in your life. And then, if you have a goal, you want to, like, my goal is to, build enough income through my business where I can go back out on my own. Maybe own a home by myself, maybe rent a home. Maybe I'll find a aligned partner, right? And we'll tackle that project together. But what I do know is I'm trying my hardest. And, if I may come up short on some days, but if he feels that I'm trying my hardest and I'm providing for him and wherever he needs to go, whatever responsibilities he has, and as a parent I'm responsible for that. As long as I don't let him down in those areas, then he shouldn't be disappointed in me. I talk about this a lot on other podcast episodes where it's like his mom, side of the family, they're in a much better financial situation. And because of that, every summer when they go on their vacations, like he's going to Turks and Caicos in a couple of weeks for spring break, right? And I can't afford to take him to Turks and Caicos. But he has told me that while he appreciates that and he loves that he can have that experience, he equally enjoys driving 2.5, 3 hours to Maryland. He equally enjoys going to Dave and Buster's, sitting on the couch with me. He equally enjoys going out to play basketball, going to Rita's with his sister and I. He equally enjoys going to Sky Zone. He enjoys the experiences that I provide for him equally, just as much as the things that his mom's side can afford. And I love that he gets both worlds. I love that he can have these magnificent traveling experiences. And I have to also be understanding that, and be compassionate to myself that, yo, at some point I'll be able to provide that. And he needs to see resiliency, right? And he needs to see like, yo, because my son has been with me through the ringer, right? He's been with me when I couldn't put food on the table sometimes because of a custody battle that was taking every single penny I had plus more. He's been through that and he's seen me overcome that. And so, yeah, it's got to kind of just like let the evidence seep in. At this point, I feel like I'm talking to myself about myself, but I know there are fathers out there that relate. And the last thing I want to say is I feel like one of the biggest reasons why you probably feel this way is society, right? It's like, yo, you're the dad, make the money, take care of the home. That's what you're supposed to do. And sometimes I feel like I can't catch a break when it comes to that societal expectation. And I'm just like, I show up in all different ways. I show up physically, I show up financially, I show up spiritually, I show up emotionally. It may look different than his friend's dad, right? But I still show up and I still try. And I know where I'm headed. And so that's what's important. I know my heart, I know where I'm headed. And so I want you to do the same thing. Say that to yourself, right? Know your heart, and I want you to know where you're headed. And I think I'll end there. I don't want to like force it, but I think I'll end there. I think I've said enough things that could be helpful to anybody who hears this, who may be feeling like their children are disappointed in them based off their current circumstance. And just remember, it's your current circumstance. Yeah. Fun fact, I recorded this very same video last week. It was about 17 minutes long and it was muted. And so this is the redo. And so, yeah, hopefully the redo is as good as the first one. I took some time within the last few days to contemplate even re-recording this, but I'm like, this needs to be said. I feel just as good as I did after doing the first one. So I hope you all enjoy, and I'll see you next week.